Get your filthy hands away from that piano. Victoria Sterling's voice cut through the champagne chatter like a blade. The billionaire heiress stepped between Daniel Hayes and the pristine Steinway Grand, her diamond bracelet glinting as she shoved his cleaning cart aside. Daniel froze, mop still dripping. 200 of Manhattan's elite turned to stare. Victoria's ice-blue eyes scanned him from his worn work boots to his faded coveralls. You think someone like you belongs near something this valuable? Her manicured finger jabbed toward the piano. This instrument costs more than your entire bloodline will ever be worth. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then Victoria delivered the killing blow. Tell you what, play this piano, and I'll marry you on the spot. The room erupted in cruel amusement. Have you ever been so humiliated that your dignity became their entertainment? The 4:30 a.m. subway car rattled through darkness toward Manhattan, carrying Daniel Hayes and the weight of 3 jobs, 2 dreams, and 1 impossible choice that would define everything. His reflection stared back from the grimy window, a face carved by responsibility before its time. At 29, Daniel looked like a man who had buried his father, raised his sister, and watched his mother's kidneys fail 1 dialysis session at a time. But his hands, resting on worn work gloves, told a different story. Long fingers, precise positioning, calloused from chemicals, but elegant in their quiet strength. Play this piano, and I'll marry you. The billionaire's words echoed in his mind as Brooklyn disappeared behind him. Victoria Sterling's cruel laughter had followed him through 18 hours of mopping floors, scrubbing toilets, and pretending her words hadn't carved themselves into his chest like graffiti on a subway wall. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from his sister Maya. Mom's session ran long again. The doctor wants to talk about the surgery. The surgery. $45,000 they didn't have. Money that might as well have been $45 million. The train screeched into his stop. Daniel shouldered his worn backpack and climbed toward street level, where Manhattan's towers pierced the sky like golden needles threading wealth through clouds. By 5:15 a.m., he was mopping the lobby of the Meridian Club, where Victoria Sterling's monthly membership fee exceeded his annual salary. The Meridian Club existed in a different universe. Persian rugs that cost more than houses. Oil paintings older than the Constitution. Members who spoke in stock tickers and measured time in quarterly reports. Daniel moved through this world like a ghost present but invisible, necessary but unacknowledged. He'd been invisible for 7 years. 7 years since Howard University, where professors had called him extraordinary. 7 years after the full scholarship to Manhattan School of Music. The scholarship he'd surrendered the day his father's construction scaffold collapsed in Queens. Son, his father had whispered in the hospital, construction dust still coating his lungs. Promise me you'll take care of them. Daniel had promised. The scholarship letter had arrived 3 days after the funeral. Now, at 6 a.m., Daniel pushed his cart past the club's music room. Through beveled glass doors, the Steinway grand piano sat like a sleeping giant. Chopin's Ballade number. One lay open on the music stand, the same piece Victoria had mocked him about. The same piece he'd performed for his senior recital, earning a standing ovation from professors who'd never seen anything like it. His fingers twitched involuntarily, muscle memory stirring. 4 years of theory, 4 years of technique, 4 years of professors saying, Daniel, you don't just play music, you speak it. But speaking music didn't pay for dialysis. It didn't cover rent in a studio apartment where his mother slept on a fold-out couch and Maya studied by lamplight because the overhead bulb had burned out last month. Daniel's current world measured exactly 420 square feet in Bed-Stuy, a space where his mother's medical equipment dominated the living room, where Maya's homework covered the kitchen table they'd inherited from their grandmother, where Daniel slept on an air mattress that deflated slightly each night, requiring morning adjustments before work. The apartment smelled like disinfectant and dreams deferred. Maya's college acceptance letters sat unopened on the counter. Columbia, NYU, Barnard. Because discussing tuition felt like discussing Mars colonization. Theoretically possible, practically impossible. On the kitchen wall hung their only family photo. Daniel at his Howard graduation, arms around his parents, Maya beaming in her high school cap and gown. Before the scaffolding, before the diagnosis, before everything became about survival instead of living. But Daniel had found his refuge. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, after the Lincoln Center cleaning crew finished their official rounds, security guard Marcus Williams himself, a former jazz musician, would unlock practice room C for exactly 2 hours. "Brother," Marcus had said 6 months ago, catching Daniel humming while mopping, "these hands weren't made for mops." Those midnight sessions kept Daniel sane. Alone with a beaten upright piano, he played everything Bach to Basie, Mozart to Monk. His fingers remembered what his life had forgotten, that excellence existed beyond circumstance, that beauty transcended bank accounts. Last Thursday, he played Chopin's Ballad Number 1, the same piece Victoria had used as ammunition. Daniel had performed it flawlessly, each note precise, each phrase breathing with emotion that 7 years of silence had only intensified. When he finished, Marcus had stood in the doorway, tears streaming. "Danny, that wasn't playing, that was praying." But prayers didn't pay bills. Prayers didn't fund surgeries. Prayers didn't silence the voice in Daniel's head that whispered he was wasting his life, one mop stroke at a time. His phone buzzed again. Maya. Got into Columbia. Full academic ride. But they want an answer by Friday about the music supplement. Said if you could just record something. Daniel stopped mopping. Maya had applied to Columbia's dual program pre-med and music composition. She'd inherited their father's mind for science and their family's gift for music. But the music supplement required a recording of an original composition performed by a skilled pianist. Daniel was that pianist. Had always been that pianist. But recording meant exposure. Recording meant risk. Recording meant stepping out of the shadows where survival was predictable, even if it was suffocating. He thought about Victoria Sterling's words. "Play this piano, and I'll marry you." The challenge hadn't been about marriage. It had been about power, about putting him in his place, about reminding him that some spaces like that Steinway, like success, like dignity, weren't meant for people like him. Daniel resumed mopping, but his movements had changed. Each stroke was deliberate, controlled, like finger exercises on a keyboard. Because somewhere between Victoria's cruelty and Maya's deadline, between his mother's medical bills and his father's dying wish, Daniel Hayes was beginning to realize that invisibility wasn't protection. It was prison. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to break out. The grandfather's gold watch on his wrist, the only inheritance his father had left, ticked toward 7 a.m. Soon, the members would arrive. Soon, Victoria Sterling would glide through these halls, her diamond bracelet catching light, her cruel words echoing in marble corridors. Soon, Daniel would have to choose between staying invisible and becoming unforgettable. Victoria Sterling arrived at the Meridian Club like a storm system, beautiful, devastating, and impossible to ignore. Her Bentley Mulsanne purred to the curb at exactly 8:47 a.m., 3 minutes before her scheduled arrival. The valet rushed forward, but Victoria was already stepping out, her Louboutin heels clicking against marble with the precision of a metronome marking time for lesser mortals. She moved through the club's entrance hall like she owned it, which, technically, her family trust did. The Sterling name adorned a brass plaque by the door, right next to Rockefeller and Vanderbilt. Old money, the kind that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. "Good morning, miss." Sterling. The concierge's voice carried the practiced reverence reserved for members whose monthly fees exceeded most annual salaries. Victoria didn't respond. She never responded to service staff unless absolutely necessary. In her world, acknowledgement was currency, and she didn't waste money on people who couldn't return the investment. Her platinum blonde hair caught the morning light streaming through stained glass windows as she glided toward the elevators. Every detail of her appearance had been calculated. The Chanel suit that cost more than most cars, the tennis bracelet featuring diamonds from 3 different continents, the 10-carat engagement ring she wore despite being single because the ring wasn't about marriage, it was about power. Behind her trailed her usual entourage, James Morrison, her chief financial officer, scrolling through pharmaceutical stock reports. Dr. Whitman, the club's resident physician who validated her health initiatives, and Rebecca Parker, her publicist, documenting every moment for social media optimization. "The wellness gala is trending," Rebecca murmured, holding up her phone. #SterlingCares has 2.3 million impressions since yesterday. Victoria's smile was sharp as surgical steel. Sterling Pharmaceuticals had raised insulin prices by 340% last quarter, but tonight's charity gala would position her as a healthcare champion. The irony was delicious and profitable. They entered the club's main ballroom, where tonight's event would unfold. Workers scurried around like ants, hanging banners and adjusting lighting. Victoria's ice-blue eyes scanned the room with predatory precision, cataloging every detail that might require correction. Her gaze stopped on the Steinway grand piano positioned center stage. "Why is that there?" Her voice carried the chill of liquid nitrogen. James consulted his tablet. The entertainment committee thought live classical music would elevate the ambiance. Very sophisticated. Sophisticated. Victoria rolled the word around her mouth like wine she was considering spitting out. "Who's performing?" James scrolled frantically. "It doesn't specify." "I believe it's decorative." Victoria approached the piano like a general surveying battlefield terrain. The instrument was magnificent, a concert grand worth $180,000, its ebony surface reflecting the ballroom's crystal chandeliers. Sheet music sat open on the stand, Chopin's Ballade No. 1. She recognized the piece, had been forced to attempt it during her mandatory childhood piano lessons at the Dalton School. She'd quit after 6 months, declaring classical music tedious and irrelevant. Her instructor had diplomatically suggested she might find fulfillment in other pursuits. "Ma'am?" A maintenance worker approached hesitantly. "Should we move this for tonight?" Victoria's attention snapped to the man like a laser finding its target. He was older, Hispanic, wearing the same uniform as the rest of the invisible army that kept her world functioning. "Do you play piano?" she asked. The man blinked, clearly unsure if this was a trick question. "No, ma'am. Of course you don't." Victoria's laugh tinkled like breaking crystal. "Silly of me to ask." She ran her manicured finger along the piano's edge, leaving no mark on the perfect surface. But her mind was working, calculating angles like a predator studying prey migration patterns. Tonight's gala would host 200 of the most influential people in Manhattan: senators, pharmaceutical executives, European nobility, tech titans, all gathered to celebrate her generosity while she positioned herself for next quarter's hostile takeover of Meridian Therapeutics. The evening needed something memorable, something that would trend beyond Rebecca's hashtags, something that would remind everyone exactly who held power in this room. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from her board chairman. "Sterling stock up 3% on Gala Buzz. Keep momentum going." She smiled, already formulating tonight's entertainment. The piano would stay exactly where it was. "Rebecca," she called, not turning around. "Make sure we have optimal camera positioning around this piano. I have a feeling tonight's gala will be unforgettable." As Victoria continued her inspection, Daniel Hayes pushed his cleaning cart past the ballroom's service entrance. Through the glass doors, he could see her standing beside the Steinway, her presence transforming the space into something between courtroom and coliseum. She caught his reflection on the piano's surface and turned slightly, those ice-blue eyes meeting him for exactly 2.3 seconds. Long enough for recognition, long enough for calculation, long enough for Victoria Sterling to decide that tonight's entertainment had just walked into view. Her smile widened, revealing teeth as white and sharp as pharmaceutical-grade cocaine. "Play this piano, and I'll marry you." The words she'd spoken 12 hours ago had been practice. Tonight would be the performance. The Meridian Club's ballroom had transformed into a stage worthy of royalty. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors polished to mirror perfection. 200 of Manhattan's most powerful figures mingled beneath oil paintings worth more than small countries' GDP. Victoria Sterling held court at the ballroom's center, a vision in midnight blue Valentino that cost more than most annual salaries. Around her, pharmaceutical executives and senators competed for her attention like planets orbiting a particularly dangerous star. "The insulin accessibility program has been transformative, Doctor," Whitman was saying, champagne flute raised in toast. "Miss Sterling's leadership proves that profit and compassion can coexist." Victoria's smile could have cut diamonds. Sterling Pharmaceuticals had tripled insulin prices while launching a compassionate care program that helped exactly 0.3% of affected patients. But tonight wasn't about mathematics. It was about optics. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice carrying across the ballroom with practiced authority, "before we begin tonight's formal program, I'd like to address something that's been troubling me." Conversations paused. Phones emerged from designer purses. Victoria Sterling troubling herself over anything was newsworthy. "Earlier today, I discovered something quite disturbing about our club's standards." Victoria's ice-blue eyes scanned the crowd, building suspense like a conductor preparing an orchestra. "It seems our service staff believe they understand fine culture." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Senator Morrison whispered to his wife, "Here we go." Near the service entrance, Daniel Hayes had been quietly refilling water glasses when Victoria's words froze him mid-step. He'd hoped to complete his evening duties invisibly, but Victoria Sterling had other plans. "Daniel," she called, her voice sharp as a scalpel, "would you join us, please?" 200 pairs of eyes turned toward him. Daniel felt the weight of their collective gaze like physical pressure, but he moved forward steadily, carrying himself with dignity despite his simple black uniform. "This morning," Victoria continued, her voice gaining theatrical momentum, "I discovered our custodial staff examining our priceless Steinway grand piano. Not cleaning it, mind you, studying it, as if someone of his background could possibly comprehend such artistry." The crowd murmured appreciatively. Rebecca Parker was already filming, her phone capturing every angle of what promised to be premium social media content. Victoria gestured toward the magnificent piano, its ebony surface reflecting the ballroom's opulence. "This instrument, ladies and gentlemen, cost more than most people earn in 5 years. It requires training, breeding, and culture to appreciate. Qualities that—" She let the sentence hang, her gaze moving pointedly from Daniel's work boots to his simple uniform. "But I'm feeling generous tonight," Victoria announced, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the ballroom. "After all, this is a charity event. So I'll make our friend here a proposition." Daniel's hands remained steady at his sides, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "If this gentleman can play even the opening measures of that Chopin piece," Victoria pointed at the sheet music with a flourish, "I'll marry him right here, right now." The ballroom erupted in delighted laughter. Someone shouted, "Victoria, you're savage!" Another voice called out, "Poor guy doesn't know what he's in for." Victoria reached into her purse and withdrew a small velvet box containing her 10-carat engagement ring. With theatrical precision, she placed it atop the piano's music stand. "There's your engagement ring, darling," she announced. "All you have to do is earn it." The crowd pressed closer, forming a semicircle around the piano. Phones lifted higher. Someone started a live stream. The hashtag number Sterling Gala Drama was already gaining traction. Of course, Victoria continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. When you inevitably fail, I trust you'll understand that some spaces simply aren't meant for people like you. Dr. Whitman chuckled nervously. Victoria, perhaps. Oh, but this is educational, Victoria interrupted. We're about to demonstrate the difference between ambition and ability, between dreaming and doing. She turned to Daniel with a smile that could have frozen champagne. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to simply return to your proper duties. The challenge hung in the air like smoke from an expensive cigar. Daniel could feel the crowd's anticipation, their hunger for entertainment at his expense. Phones recorded his every micro-expression. Social media algorithms were already calculating viral potential. In that moment, standing before Manhattan's elite while they waited for his humiliation, Daniel heard an echo of his grandfather's voice. Dignity isn't something they can take from you, son. It's something you either carry or you don't. Victoria's ice-blue eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction. She'd created the perfect trap: accept the challenge and face public failure, or decline and confirm every stereotype she'd just articulated. Well, she prompted, adjusting her diamond bracelet with deliberate precision. Do we have a groom, or do we have a janitor who knows his place? The ballroom held its collective breath, waiting for Daniel Hayes to choose between invisibility and destruction. The piano waited too, its keys reflecting ballroom light like a smile full of perfect teeth. Time moved like honey in winter. Daniel stood in the center of 200 predatory gazes, each phone camera a tiny eye recording his humiliation for eternal replay. The ballroom's marble floor seemed to tilt beneath his feet, threatening to send him sliding toward either dignity or destruction. Victoria Sterling's engagement ring caught the chandelier light, 10 carats of mockery perched atop sheet music that might as well have been written in hieroglyphics. At least, that's what everyone expected him to think. Tick-tock, Victoria sang softly, checking her diamond Cartier watch. Don't keep your bride waiting, sweetheart. Senator Morrison's wife whispered loudly enough for Daniel to hear. Poor man probably can't even read music. Another voice. This is painful to watch. Daniel's mind raced through calculations. Viral humiliation, job termination, his family's medical bills, Maya's Columbia deadline, his mother's surgery, the scholarship that could change everything or destroy what little they had left. But then, cutting through the noise of fear and consequence, came his grandfather's voice from a memory 20 years old. Danny, they can take your job, your money, even your dreams. But they can't take what God put in your fingers and your heart. His grandfather, who'd played piano in Harlem jazz clubs before Jim Crow made music a luxury he couldn't afford. Who'd worked construction by day and taught Daniel scales by lamplight. Who'd died believing his grandson would one day make music that mattered. Daniel's hand moved instinctively to his wrist, where his grandfather's gold watch rested beneath his uniform cuff. The metal felt warm against his skin, a reminder of promises made and potential waiting. He thought about Maya, brilliant and determined, needing just one recording to complete her Columbia application. He thought about his mother, dignified even as dialysis stole her strength piece by piece. He thought about his father's dying words, take care of them. Taking care meant more than paying bills. It meant showing them that surrender wasn't hereditary, that being underestimated wasn't the same as being defeated. Daniel raised his head, meeting Victoria's ice-blue gaze directly. For the first time since childhood, he allowed his full height to assert itself, shoulders squaring, spine straightening into the posture his music professors had called regal. He removed his work gloves slowly, deliberately, revealing hands that bore both the calluses of survival and the elegant length of artistry. His grandfather's watch caught the light, gold gleaming against dark skin like defiance made manifest. "I accept your proposal, Ms. Sterling," Daniel said, his voice carrying new authority that seemed to shift the ballroom's acoustic balance. "But when I'm done, I expect you to honor it." The crowd stirred, sensing something unexpected in his tone. Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. This wasn't the cowering response she'd orchestrated. Daniel began walking toward the piano, each step measured like the opening notes of a symphony about to change everything. Daniel approached the Steinway grand piano like a man walking toward his own resurrection. The ballroom fell silent, not the polite quiet of anticipation, but the absolute stillness that precedes either triumph or catastrophe. 200 of Manhattan's most powerful figures held their collective breath, phones poised to capture what they assumed would be spectacular failure. Victoria Sterling stood beside the piano like a prosecutor presenting evidence, her diamond bracelet catching light as she gestured toward the sheet music. "Chopin's Ballade Number 1, she announced to the crowd. One of the most technically demanding pieces in classical repertoire. Even trained pianists struggle with its complexity. Her ice-blue eyes met Daniel's with predatory satisfaction. "But please, do try your best." The crowd pressed closer, forming an amphitheater of expectation around the Steinway. Rebecca Parker adjusted her phone angle to capture both Daniel's inevitable failure and Victoria's triumphant reaction. Someone in the back whispered, "This is going to be painful to watch." Another voice responded, "I can't look away." Daniel reached the piano bench, his work boots silent against the Persian rug. For a moment, he simply stood there, taking in the instrument's magnificent presence. The Steinway was a monument to human craftsmanship, $180,000 of precision engineering, its ebony surface reflecting the ballroom's crystal chandeliers like black water under starlight. He'd dreamed of playing an instrument like this. During those midnight sessions at Lincoln Center, hunched over a beaten, upright piano with 3 broken keys and a sustain pedal that stuck, he'd imagined what it would feel like to have 88 perfect keys responding to his touch with concert hall precision. Now, surrounded by people who expected him to fail, he was about to find out. Daniel sat on the bench, adjusting its height with movements so practiced they seemed automatic. His hands hovered over the keys, feeling the instrument's energy like heat from a forge. The crowd pressed closer, phones lifted higher, social media algorithms calculating viral potential. "This should be good," someone whispered. "How long before he gives up?" another voice murmured. $10 says he doesn't make it past the first page, Senator Morrison muttered to his wife. "I'll take that bet, Doctor." Whitman replied unexpectedly. "Something about his posture." Victoria's smile widened. She'd choreographed this humiliation perfectly. The public challenge, the impossible piece, the guarantee of failure that would cement her superiority while providing premium entertainment for Manhattan's elite. The hashtag Sterling Gala Drama was already trending with 50,000 mentions. Daniel flexed his fingers, a subtle movement that revealed the elegant length of digits shaped by years of disciplined practice. The calluses from cleaning chemicals couldn't hide the natural grace of hands that had been born to make music. His grandfather's gold watch caught the light, a reminder of legacy and promise. He tested the piano's action with a few silent key presses, feeling the instrument's response. The Steinway's touch was magnificent, sensitive enough to respond to the slightest dynamic variation, powerful enough to fill concert halls. Daniel's eyes closed briefly, and when they opened, something fundamental had shifted. The janitor was gone. In his place sat an artist. He closed his eyes and took a breath that seemed to draw silence from the very air. When his fingers touched the keys for the first time, the contact was so gentle it barely produced sound, a whisper of music that somehow commanded absolute attention. The opening of Chopin's Ballad Number. One emerged like dawn breaking over still water. Single notes, precise and clear, each one placed with the delicacy of a surgeon, and the confidence of a master. Daniel's left hand joined with soft bass notes that seemed to make the ballroom's marble floors vibrate in harmony. The crowd's smirks began to fade. Victoria's eyebrows drew together almost imperceptibly. This wasn't the hesitant fumbling she'd expected. The notes were clean, purposeful, technically correct. But surely he would stumble when the piece became more demanding. By measure 8, Daniel's posture had completely transformed. His shoulders relaxed into muscle memory earned through 10,000 hours of practice. His wrists floated above the keys with the fluid grace of a conductor leading an invisible orchestra. The shy janitor had vanished, replaced by an artist whose presence filled the vast ballroom like incense. Dr. Whitman's champagne glass paused halfway to his lips. "That's actually quite sophisticated," he murmured to his companion. European nobility in the crowd began to pay genuine attention. Count Alessandro Di Marco, who owned a collection of rare Stradivarius instruments, leaned forward with the expression of a man recognizing something valuable. "The touch," he whispered to his wife. "Listen to that touch." Measure 16 brought the melody's first true flowering. Daniel's right hand danced across the upper registers while his left maintained the rhythmic foundation, creating a conversation between voices that seemed to emanate from somewhere deeper than the piano strings. The music wasn't being played, it was being born. His touch revealed Steinway's voice in ways the instrument rarely experienced. Each key responded with crystalline clarity, the concert grand's superior acoustics allowing subtle dynamics that would have been impossible on lesser instruments. Daniel shaped phrases with breathing that seemed to extend the piano's natural decay, creating legato lines that flowed like silk ribbons through the air. The audience began to shift unconsciously. Bodies that had been positioned for mockery now leaned forward in genuine interest. Conversations died mid-whisper. Even Rebecca Parker's social media commentary fell silent as she realized her live stream was capturing something extraordinary. The comment feed exploded with messages. "Holy shit, is this real? Who is this guy? This is actually incredible." Senator Morrison lowered his phone entirely. His wife grabbed his arm, whispering, "David, he's really good." The transition to the B section arrived like a thunderclap wrapped in velvet. Daniel's technique exploded into view octaves that rang like cathedral bells, arpeggios that cascaded down the keyboard like water over stones, chromatic runs so fast they blurred into pure emotion. His hands moved with surgeon-like precision while his face reflected the music's emotional landscape, tender during lyrical passages, fierce during dramatic climaxes. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. "He's actually a pianist." "Shh," came the sharp reply. The crowd was no longer watching a humiliation unfold. They were witnessing artistry at a level most had never experienced outside Lincoln Center. Victoria's ice-blue eyes widened as Daniel navigated passages that would challenge conservatory graduates. His left hand thundered through bass octaves while his right hand executed runs that seemed to defy the physical limitations of 10 fingers. The sound filled every corner of the ballroom, resonating off marble walls and crystal fixtures with cathedral-like majesty. A young pharmaceutical executive pulled out his phone to Google the piece's difficulty level. His face went pale as he read, "Considered one of the most challenging works in the piano repertoire. Requires advanced technical skill and mature musicianship, often used as a benchmark for professional-level pianists." The crowd began to murmur in amazement. Tech titans who collected rare instruments as investments realized they were witnessing something their money couldn't buy. Pharmaceutical researchers who understood the intricate complexities of molecular structures recognized equivalent complexity being executed with flawless precision. Daniel navigated Chopin's most treacherous passages like a master chef wielding a knife-dangerous techniques made to look effortless through years of dedicated practice. His pedaling created layers of resonance that transformed the ballroom into a concert hall, each harmony hanging in the air like precious perfume. The development section showcased interpretive maturity that defied his circumstances. Daniel took risks with tempo and dynamics that only artists comfortable with their mastery attempt slowing impossible passages to extract maximum emotional impact, then accelerating through technical fireworks that would challenge conservatory professors. Count DiMarco turned to his wife with tears in his eyes. "Maria, this is what we heard at La Scala in 1987. This is that level of artistry." Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her diamond bracelet. This wasn't possible. Janitors didn't play Chopin like this. Working-class men didn't possess this level of cultural sophistication. Everything she believed about breeding, education, and social hierarchy was crumbling with each perfectly executed phrase. The music built toward its climactic return, Daniel's entire body now moving with Chopin's rhythms. His feet worked the pedals like a master organist, his shoulders swayed with melodic lines, even his breathing synchronized with the music's phrases. He wasn't just playing the piano. He had become the conduit through which Chopin's genius flowed into the modern world. Rebecca Parker's phone trembled in her hands. Her live stream had gained 100,000 viewers in real time. Comments flooded faster than she could read. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Who is this man? I'm literally crying. This needs to go viral right now." The ballroom's acoustics carried every nuance of Daniel's performance to its farthest corners. Pharmaceutical executives who had never attended a classical concert found themselves moved to tears by music they couldn't name but somehow understood. Tech moguls who measured success in algorithms discovered that some things couldn't be quantified, only experienced. Then came the cadenza, the piece's most technically demanding passage, where even professional pianists held their breath. Daniel's hands separated into independent voices, the left maintaining bass octaves while the right exploded into cascading runs that seemed to defy physical possibility. The ballroom held its collective breath. Victoria's mouth fell open as Daniel executed passages that her own childhood piano teacher had called impossible for anyone but the most gifted artists. His fingers moved so quickly they blurred, yet every note rang clear and true. The Steinway sang under his touch like an instrument possessed, its voice soaring above the stunned silence of Manhattan's elite. Count DiMarco stood up involuntarily, his years of musical education recognizing mastery when he witnessed it. Other audience members followed suit, unable to remain seated in the presence of such artistry. Daniel paused for exactly one heartbeat before the final section, a moment of perfect silence that stretched like eternity. In that pause, 200 people realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Phones that had been recording for mockery now captured reverence. Then Daniel's hands descended like controlled lightning. The final measures erupted with power that seemed to shake the crystal chandeliers. Bass notes thundered through the ballroom's foundation, while melody lines soared toward the vaulted ceiling. Daniel's technique was flawless, but more than that, it was transcendent. He wasn't just executing Chopin's vision. He was channeling 7 years of suppressed dreams, a lifetime of being invisible, generations of ancestors whose talents had been buried beneath survival. The final chord rang out like a declaration of war against every assumption the crowd had carried into this room. Daniel held the sustain pedal down, letting the harmonies decay naturally while the ballroom absorbed what had just occurred. Silence. Complete, absolute silence that stretched for 4.3 seconds, long enough for reality to reassemble itself around a new truth. The eruption. The standing ovation began with Count Alessandro DiMarco, the Italian nobleman whose family had patronized artists for 5 centuries, rose from his seat like a man witnessing the second coming. His weathered hands, which had applauded Pavarotti at La Scala and Horowitz at Carnegie Hall, came together in thunderous appreciation. "Bravo!" he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. Magnifico! Absolutely magnificent. The applause spread like wildfire. Dr. Whitman leaped to his feet, champagne forgotten. Senator Morrison's wife dabbed her eyes with a Hermes scarf worth more than most monthly salaries. Tech executives who measured everything in data points found themselves moved by something that couldn't be quantified. Extraordinary, Dr. Whitman called out. Simply extraordinary. Rebecca Parker's phone shook in her hands as she tried to capture the transformation sweeping through the ballroom. Her live stream had exploded to 250,000 viewers. Comments flooded the feed faster than she could process. I'm literally sobbing. This man is a genius. Victoria Sterling just got owned. Who is this king? The Lincoln Center director, who had been attending as Victoria's guest, pushed through the crowd toward the piano. His face bore the expression of a man who had just discovered buried treasure. Sir, he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom as conversations paused to listen. I don't know who you are, but you belong on the world's greatest stages, not cleaning them. The crowd murmured in agreement. Business cards began emerging from tuxedo pockets as classical music patrons and talent scouts recognized what they had witnessed. Someone shouted, "Give this man a recording contract." Another voice called, "Carnegie Hall!" He needs to be at Carnegie Hall. Through it all, Victoria Sterling stood frozen beside the piano like a statue carved from ice and humiliation. Her face cycled through a spectrum of emotions, disbelief melting into embarrassment, embarrassment hardening into calculation. The woman who had orchestrated this evening's entertainment had become its most spectacular casualty. Her ice-blue eyes darted around the ballroom, searching for escape routes from her own viral disaster. Her entourage had evaporated. James Morrison was busy recording the applause on his phone, already calculating damage control strategies. Dr. Whitman had joined the standing ovation. Even Rebecca Parker, her own publicist, was focused entirely on capturing the crowd's reaction rather than protecting her employer's image. Victoria's diamond bracelet caught the light as her hands trembled slightly. The 10-carat engagement ring still sat atop the piano's music stand, a monument to her miscalculation. What had been intended as props for Daniel's humiliation had become evidence of her own spectacular misjudgment. Daniel remained seated at the piano bench, his chest rising and falling with the exertion of channeling Chopin's masterpiece. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his expression carried the quiet satisfaction of a man who had just proven that excellence recognizes no boundaries. He stood slowly, his work uniform somehow transformed into the costume of triumph. The applause intensified as he rose, 200 pairs of hands celebrating not just his performance, but his very existence. For 7 years, Daniel Hayes had been invisible in this world. Now he commanded its complete attention. He turned to face Victoria directly, his brown eyes meeting her ice-blue gaze with steady confidence. The janitor who had trembled under her mockery had been replaced by an artist who knew his worth. "Miss Sterling," Daniel said, his voice carrying clearly across the ballroom despite the continuing applause. "I believe you have a wedding to plan." He gestured toward the engagement ring perched on the music stand, his movement precise and elegant. "Should I clear my calendar?" The ballroom erupted in delighted laughter and renewed applause. Someone whistled appreciatively. Another voice shouted, "She walked right into that one!" Victoria's face flushed crimson beneath her perfectly applied makeup. Her mouth opened and closed without sound, a billionaire rendered speechless by a janitor's dignity. The woman who had built an empire on strategic cruelty had just been outmaneuvered by someone she had considered beneath her notice. Daniel reached for his work gloves, which he had placed beside the piano bench. With deliberate precision, he set them down next to Victoria's engagement ring, the contrast stark and meaningful calloused protection beside pampered luxury. "The pleasure," he said softly, "was all mine." The power dynamic that had defined the evening's opening had been completely reversed. Victoria Sterling, who had commanded every room she entered for 35 years, now stood peripheral to her own event. The spotlight that had been hers by birthright now illuminated a man she had tried to destroy. The applause continued, growing stronger rather than fading, as Manhattan's elite celebrated the triumph of talent over prejudice, dignity over cruelty, substance over surface. Victoria's carefully orchestrated humiliation had become Daniel's coronation, and every phone in the room had recorded it for posterity. The applause showed no signs of stopping. If anything, it intensified as the full magnitude of what had occurred settled into the collective consciousness of Manhattan's elite. Daniel Hayes had not merely played piano, he had shattered assumptions, rewritten narratives, and transformed a ballroom into a cathedral of human dignity. Count DiMarco pushed through the crowd, his eyes bright with the fervor of a man who had just witnessed artistic history. "Maestro," he said, grasping Daniel's hand with both of his own. "In 60 years of attending concerts, I have rarely heard Chopin played with such soul. You must tell me, where did you study?" Before Daniel could answer, the Lincoln Center director was at his side, business card extended. "Thomas Berkowitz, artistic director. We need to talk immediately. I'm thinking about residency, recording opportunities, and a debut recital. This level of artistry cannot remain hidden." Business cards materialized from everywhere. Classical music patrons, talent scouts, recording executives, all recognizing the same truth that had just slapped them across their collective faces. Excellence had been cleaning their floors while they drank champagne and discussed stock portfolios. "Deutsche Grammophon," announced a sharp-suited woman pushing through the crowd. "Astrid Mueller, A&R director. We need to discuss recording contracts. Tonight." Rebecca Parker's phone had become the epicenter of a digital earthquake. Her live stream now boasted 500,000 concurrent viewers and climbing. The hashtag #JanitorGenius was trending worldwide, displacing Sterling Gala drama entirely. Comments flooded faster than the platform could process. "This man deserves everything. Victoria Sterling just created a legend. I can't stop crying." Talent has no address. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Marcus Williams, the Lincoln Center security guard who had unlocked Practice Room C for Daniel's midnight sessions, appeared at the ballroom's service entrance. He'd been working a double shift when Rebecca's live stream appeared on his phone. Now he stood in the doorway, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Danny," he called out, his voice thick with emotion. "I told you those hands weren't made for mops." The crowd turned toward the service entrance, watching as Marcus approached his friend. The two men embraced janitor and security guard, teacher and student, brothers in a world that had tried to render them invisible. "Marcus got me those practice sessions," Daniel announced to the crowd, his arm around the older man's shoulders. "Without him, tonight never happens." The applause redirected toward Marcus, who had become an accidental hero in the evening's narrative. Phones captured the moment, transforming a simple embrace into a symbol of mentorship and possibility. Victoria Sterling watched from beside the piano, her world imploding in real time. Her pharmaceutical empire's stock price was already dropping as traders absorbed the viral disaster. Board members were frantically texting damage control strategies. Her phone buzzed incessantly with calls from crisis management firms, but the consequences were only beginning. "Miss Sterling," came a sharp voice from the crowd. Harrison Cross, CEO of Meridian Therapeutics, Victoria's primary business rival, emerged with the smile of a shark scenting blood. "Fascinating evening. I'm establishing a $50 million scholarship fund for overlooked talent in your honor. We'll call it the Sterling Second Chances Foundation." The crowd applauded this announcement with particular enthusiasm. Victoria's face went ashen as she realized her moment of cruelty was being transformed into her competitor's philanthropy. $100 million, announced tech mogul Jennifer Park, not to be outdone. Full-ride scholarships for working-class artists. Because clearly we've been looking for talent in all the wrong places. The bidding war of charitable one-upmanship continued as Manhattan's elite competed to distance themselves from Victoria's humiliation while associating with Daniel's triumph. Within minutes, over $300 million in scholarships and arts funding had been pledged, all inspired by watching a janitor play piano. Daniel's phone, which had been buzzing intermittently, suddenly exploded with notifications. Someone had identified him on social media. His Facebook page gained 50,000 followers in 10 minutes. A GoFundMe for his mother's surgery created by a viewer watching the live stream had already reached $100,000 in donations. "Danny!" Maya's voice cut through the ballroom noise as she burst through the main entrance, still in her Columbia University sweatshirt. She'd sprinted from the subway after seeing her brother trending on Twitter. "What the hell is happening? You're literally everywhere!" The crowd parted as Maya rushed to her brother, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Mom's watching on Facebook Live from the hospital," she whispered. "She's crying." Happy crying. They've already called about the surgery. Someone paid for it. Some anonymous donor wired the full amount. Daniel's composure finally cracked. 7 years of carrying his family's weight. 7 years of invisible struggle. 7 years of deferred dreams. It all culminated in this moment of recognition that felt like resurrection. The Lincoln Center director appeared at Daniel's shoulder again. "Mr. Hayes, I'd like to offer you the principal pianist position, effective immediately. Full benefits, housing allowance, and creative freedom. Will you accept?" Daniel looked around the ballroom that had witnessed his transformation from invisible to unforgettable. Victoria Sterling stood alone beside her piano, a billionaire rendered irrelevant by her own cruelty. The crowd waited for his response with the anticipation of people who had just witnessed history. "I'll finish my shift first," Daniel said quietly. "But yes, I accept." The applause that followed seemed to shake the foundation of everything Manhattan thought it knew about worth, talent, and the dangerous assumptions that privilege makes about possibility. 3 months later, Daniel Hayes walked onto the Carnegie Hall stage wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his grandfather's gold watch catching the spotlight as he approached the Steinway grand piano that waited like an old friend. The sold-out audience included tech titans, pharmaceutical executives, and European nobility, the same people who had witnessed his transformation at the Meridian Club. But now, they weren't watching a janitor play piano. They were witnessing the debut of America's newest classical sensation. In the front row sat his mother, radiant and healthy after her successful surgery, and Maya, now thriving in her first semester at Columbia with a full scholarship that had materialized from Daniel's viral moment. Marcus Williams occupied a place of honor, his security guard uniform replaced by a suit purchased specifically for this occasion. Victoria Sterling was notably absent. Her pharmaceutical empire had crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny that followed #JanitorGenius. The board had replaced her with a CEO who actually understood the difference between profit and humanity. She'd retreated to her Hampton estate, where her Steinway grand piano sat covered and untouched, a monument to the danger of underestimating others. As Daniel's fingers touched the keys for his opening piece, Chopin's Ballade Number 1, naturally, he thought about the journey from invisibility to this moment. Every midnight practice session had led here. Every moment of being overlooked had prepared him for being truly seen. The music that emerged wasn't just technically perfect. It was prayer made audible, dignity transformed into sound, proof that excellence doesn't require permission to exist. When the final notes faded into reverent silence, Daniel stood to accept an ovation that seemed to last forever. But his mind wasn't on the applause. It was on the lesson his grandfather had whispered decades ago. They can take your job, your money, even your dreams. But they can't take what God puts in your soul. Tonight, 2,800 people understood that truth viscerally. Talent doesn't wear uniforms. Genius doesn't announce itself with designer labels. Every person carrying a mop bucket might be carrying Mozart in their heart. Every security guard could be harboring Beethoven. Every cashier might compose symphonies in silence. We live in a world that judges worth by job titles, potential by postal codes, value by bank statements. But excellence is democratically distributed while opportunity remains criminally hoarded. How many Daniels walks past you every day? How many times have you been Daniel underestimated, overlooked, undervalued because of what you do rather than who you are? And more importantly, when was the last time you were Victoria making assumptions based on appearances, judging books by their covers, missing brilliance because it didn't come wrapped in privilege? Excellence is everywhere. The question isn't whether it exists, it's whether we're paying attention. Subscribe for more stories that prove extraordinary. People come in ordinary packages, because everyone deserves their Carnegie Hall moment. Even you.